Welcome to History Channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. The Philippine Expeditionary Force to Korea arrived in Busan on September 19, 1950, marking the nation's first combat deployment overseas after independence. These young soldiers represented the Philippines in the Korean War, supporting United Nations forces during the conflict. Their presence signaled solidarity with South Korea in resisting communist aggression. In 1917, Robert Bennett's prison photo was taken after his conviction for a violent crime. Though sentenced to life, he was freed after just 3 years, following intervention by the Salvation Army. Tragically, he re-offended, committing another horrific assault, exposing flaws in the justice system of early 20th century Australia. George Mallory and Andrew Irvine stood on Mount Everest in June 1924 in what became their last known photograph. Both climbers soon disappeared high on the mountain, sparking one of the greatest mysteries in mountaineering history. Their attempt symbolized human determination to conquer Earth's tallest peak, despite immense risks and uncertainties. In 1990, Erfurt, Thuringia, offered an unfiltered glimpse of life in East Germany during its final year. Everyday moments showed both resilience and disillusionment, as citizens faced economic hardship and fading state control. This candid portrayal reflected a society on the brink of historic transformation, just before German reunification began. On November 8, 1977, heavy rainstorms flooded New York City and New Jersey, causing severe disruption. The same day, President Jimmy Carter delivered an urgent address on America's growing energy crisis. These overlapping events highlighted the nation's vulnerability to both natural forces and economic challenges during a turbulent decade. In 1933, pilots Steponas Darius and Stasys Urinas prepared their Belanca Lituanica for a daring transatlantic flight. Their mission was to strengthen ties between Lithuania and the United States. Though they tragically perished in Europe, their attempt remains celebrated as an enduring symbol of courage, ambition, and aviation history. In August 1941, a Soviet mother shielded her child during relentless German shelling in Krasnaya Sloboda. The image captured the terror faced by civilians as the Eastern Front raged. It remains a haunting reminder of war's brutality and the unyielding instinct to protect life amid destruction and fear. Children played in Hankou snow in March 1938, unaware of the approaching storm of war. Within months, the Battle of Wuhan erupted, and by October the city fell to Japanese forces. This fleeting moment of innocence contrasted sharply with the devastation soon to engulf their world. On November 4, 1924, crowds gathered outside the Washington Star newspaper office, awaiting election results. Enthusiastic citizens followed updates in real time as the press remained the nation's primary source of political news. Such gatherings reflected the growing role of media in shaping public perception of American democracy. In February 1943, wounded German soldiers listened to Joseph Goebbels' infamous Total War speech at the Berlin Sports Palace. Delivered during a desperate phase of the war, the speech called for complete national mobilization. These injured men symbolized both the human cost of conflict and the regime's relentless propaganda. In 1977, U.S. President Jimmy Carter met Nigerian leader Olusegun Obasanjo, strengthening diplomatic relations between the two nations. Their discussions emphasized cooperation on energy, trade, and African security. The meeting highlighted America's interest in Nigeria's growing regional influence and the importance of building international partnerships during the Cold War. In 1996, Princess Diana traveled to Greece for the funeral of Yanis Kaliviadis, a young man who had died from cystic fibrosis. She had met him in London and been touched by his resilience. Her gesture of compassion demonstrated her lasting commitment to those suffering beyond the public spotlight. The Citicorp Tower in New York, photographed in 1977, stood as a striking example of modern architecture. Its unique stilted design and sleek form dominated the Manhattan skyline. The building reflected the ambitious energy of the decade, showcasing both innovation and the bold urban development reshaping America's largest city. In 1923, Elvia Carrillo Puerto became the first woman elected to Mexico's Congress, despite women lacking the right to vote. Her victory was groundbreaking, achieved in an era of entrenched inequality. She emerged as a symbol of perseverance and change, paving the way for greater political participation by Mexican women. During the 1943 Zoot-Suit Riots in Los Angeles, young Mexican Americans were stripped and beaten in the streets. Their clothing, seen as unpatriotic during wartime, became a target of hostility. These violent clashes revealed deep racial tensions in the United States, exposing divisions beneath the surface of American society. In October 1944, Soviet soldiers and Yugoslav partisans celebrated together after liberating Belgrade from German occupation. The moment symbolized unity in the struggle against fascism. For many, the liberation marked both relief and uncertainty, as the city emerged from years of violence into a new era of political transformation. Around 1900, miners in South Africa paused to pose for a photograph underground. The racially mixed team reflected the brutal labor system driving the gold industry. Their expressions revealed exhaustion and resilience, capturing the human cost of a trade that enriched empires while exploiting countless workers far from the surface. In 1983, roller skating dominated the boardwalks of Los Angeles. Bright fashion, music, and movement captured the spirit of the era. For many, skating was more than recreation. It symbolized freedom, community, and style, reflecting the carefree energy that defined California youth culture during the early years of the decade. In 1987, Moscow's Bolshoi Theater became the center of celebration for the 70th anniversary of the Russian Revolution. The grand building hosted elaborate performances, symbolizing Soviet pride in its revolutionary past. Yet beneath the spectacle lay growing tensions, as the USSR neared the end of its own dramatic historical chapter. In September 1938, Sudeten Germans rejoiced after Konrad Henlein demanded that their region be annexed by Germany. Their celebrations reflected hopes for unification, though it fueled international crisis. This moment highlighted the rising power of Nazi influence and foreshadowed the rapid unraveling of peace in Europe on the eve of war. In 1931, Japanese troops entered Shenyang during the Mukden Incident, marking the start of Japan's full-scale occupation of Manchuria. The event destabilized the region and signaled aggressive expansion. This moment is widely regarded as one of the early sparks that would eventually ignite broader conflict across Asia in the 1930s. In 1992, a 40-year-old Vladimir Putin carried bags for St. Petersburg Mayor Anatoly Sobchak. At the time, Putin headed the city's External Relations Committee, holding a modest role. Within a decade, however, he rose swiftly through Russian politics, transforming from a behind-the-scenes aide into the nation's most powerful leader. In the 1950s, Japanese women practiced judo in Hokkaido, where one student executed a tomo-nage throw. The scene reflected post-war Japan's embrace of martial arts for discipline and empowerment. Women's participation signaled shifting cultural norms, as traditional practices were adapted to modern contexts in both sport and society. On May 19, 1991, visitors to the Lishan giant Buddha in Sichuan sat upon its colossal stone toes. The 233-foot statue, carved during the Tang dynasty, towered above them. This gathering reflected both reverence and leisure, as modern travelers engaged with one of China's most enduring cultural monuments. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were photographed for the last time in Sarajevo. Hours later, they were assassinated, triggering the chain of events that led to World War I. The image captures a fleeting moment before a tragedy that reshaped global history. In 2002, former Manson family member Leslie Van Houten testified at a California parole hearing. Convicted for her role in the 1969 La Bianca murders, she faced continued scrutiny decades later. The photo highlighted society's struggle with questions of justice, redemption, and the long shadow of one of America's darkest crimes. Oscar II, King of Sweden from 1872 until his death in 1907, also reigned as the last. Bernadotte, King of Norway until 1905. A colorized image from around 1900 shows him in dignified form, reflecting both his prominence in Scandinavian history and the era's transition into the modern age. In 1939, the Samoan Nazi Party gathered in Apia as an official branch of the German NSDAP, known for poor organization and disregard for Nazi racial rules. The group remained short-lived. By April, bankruptcy ended their activities, leaving behind a strange, little-known episode in the history of global extremism. On July 31, 1994, Vice President Paul Kagame met with U.S. Defense Secretary William J. Perry to discuss Rwanda's genocide and its aftermath. Their dialogue reflected international concern and Rwanda's uncertain recovery. The meeting symbolized the world's struggle to confront the consequences of mass violence and fragile political reconstruction. In 1942, German soldiers paused with a Sami reindeer herder in Lapland. The unusual encounter highlighted wartime interactions between occupying forces and indigenous communities. The Sami, long tied to the Arctic landscape, found themselves caught between powerful armies, their way of life disrupted by conflict, yet persisting with resilience. Around 1946, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth were photographed at Windsor with their daughters, Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret. Relaxing in their garden, the family exuded warmth and stability. For a war-weary Britain, such images symbolized hope and continuity as the nation moved into a period of post-war recovery. In 1917, British soldiers of the 51st Division found levity in France, performing as clowns called the Balmorals. Their act entertained comrades during the grim days of World War I. The photo captured the human need for humor and relief, even amid the harshest realities of trench warfare. Ursula Goetz, a member of the Red Orchestra resistance, risked her life opposing Nazi propaganda. In 1942, she distributed leaflets against the exhibition, The Soviet Paradise. Arrested soon after, she was executed in 1943. Her courage remains a powerful example of youthful defiance against oppression and the cost of resistance. In 1919, Soviet revolutionary Felix Dzerzhinsky appeared with Cheka agents, founders of the Soviet Union's first secret police. The Cheka soon became infamous for orchestrating the Red Terror during the Civil War. This early image reflects the rise of state security forces that would shape Soviet governance for decades. In 1918, the Council of Lithuania gathered in Vilnius to sign the Act of Independence. Their decision restored Lithuania's sovereignty after centuries of foreign domination. The photo captured a defining moment, as determined leaders committed themselves to building a free state, even as the First World War still raged. During the 1960s, civil rights protests spread across the United States. Ordinary men and women marched against segregation and demanded equality under the law. Their persistence reshaped American society, challenging entrenched systems of racism. These demonstrations marked a turning point in the long struggle for justice and human rights. In 1945, Technical Sergeant William E. Thomas and Private First Class Joseph Jackson prepared artillery shells with a mocking inscription addressed to Hitler. Calling them Easter eggs, the gesture combined defiance and humor. It reflected soldiers' morale and determination during the final months of the Second World War. At Hong Kong's Stanley Civil Internment Camp, Douglas William Waterton etched a final inscription on his cell wall before his execution in 1943. Captured for running a secret radio, he paid the ultimate price for resistance. After liberation in 1945, his words remained as a haunting trace of defiance. In 1954, a group photo session before the Miss Universe and Miss USA pageants in California took a dramatic turn when Miss New Zealand fainted. While some contestants expressed concern, others continued smiling for the cameras. The image revealed the pressure behind the glamour of international beauty competitions. In 1947, Josip Broz Tito sat in his Belgrade office as Yugoslavia's new leader. Emerging from the chaos of war, he consolidated power by uniting partisans and shaping a socialist federation. Tito's leadership defined Yugoslavia's path, balancing between East and West during the volatile early years of the Cold War. A 1920s portrait shows Abdülmecid II, the last widely recognized caliph of the Muslim world. As head of the Ottoman dynasty under the Republic of Turkey, his role was largely symbolic. His later exile ended centuries of imperial authority, marking the close of a profound chapter in Islamic history. In October 1944, an elderly German Volkssturm member stood holding a worn Mannlicher rifle. Hastily mobilized, men too old or too young for service were pressed into defending the crumbling Reich. The image symbolized Germany's desperation as the war turned irreversibly against them in its final, devastating year. In 1934, Russian emigres of the Mladoresy movement gathered, blending monarchist tradition with elements of communism. Their motto, Tsar and the Soviets, reflected this unusual hybrid vision. Strong fascist influences shaped their ideas, but the group dissolved after the Second World War, leaving only fragments of their controversial legacy. A portrait from the 1910s shows Grand Duke Kirill Vladimirovich, a Romanov who later declared himself emperor in exile. His claim in 1924 was divisive, as he sought to blend imperial tradition with acknowledgement of Soviet realities. Dubbed the Soviet Tsar, his stance reflected the fractured loyalties of displaced nobility. In 1951, Paul Robeson presented "We Charge Genocide" to the United Nations in New York. Filed by the Civil Rights Congress, it accused the United States of systematic violence and oppression against African Americans. Citing segregation, police brutality, and lynching, the petition highlighted racial injustice on a global stage. On December 16, 1963, the flags of Zanzibar and Kenya were raised at the United Nations headquarters. Their addition to the plaza's 111 flags marked the independence of two African nations. It symbolized the growing wave of decolonization and the reshaping of international representation in the post-war world. A Russian soldier, photographed around 1990, stuck out his tongue for the camera. The candid moment contrasted sharply with the usual stern images of military life, captured during a time of upheaval as the Soviet Union neared collapse. The photo reflected both uncertainty and human levity in a changing era. The last known photograph of a Barbary lion was taken in 1924, capturing a species on the edge of extinction. Once roaming North Africa, these lions were driven to disappearance by hunting and habitat loss. The picture endures as a final silent witness to their vanished presence. In 1943, photographs documented everyday scenes of Crimean tatars, unaware of what was to come. Just 1 year later, the entire population was forcibly deported under Stalin's orders. The images, quiet and ordinary, stand in stark contrast to the suffering and displacement that soon overwhelmed their community. On September 16, 1945, Japanese Vice Admiral Ruitaro Fujita signed the surrender of forces in Hong Kong at Government House. This act formally ended the occupation that had lasted since 1941. The ceremony marked both liberation for the territory and the broader conclusion of the Second World War in Asia.